The air in the Redmere courtroom tasted stale. Caleb fixed his tie and leaned toward me, whispering, "Say goodbye to your side piece." His lawyer stood up, listing my alleged indiscretions to the judge. I simply checked my watch. The double doors swung open, and a man in a charcoal suit stepped inside. Caleb smirked, convinced his victory had just walked in. He had no idea that man was not my lover. He was the mirror of truth. My name is Violet Richardson. I was 38 years old, and I was sitting in a courtroom in Redmere, Colorado, waiting for my husband to destroy me. The air in the room was thick with the scent of floor wax and stale coffee, a smell that I knew I would associate with betrayal for the rest of my life. My hands were resting on my leather handbag, perfectly still. I had practiced this stillness in front of the mirror in my temporary apartment for 3 nights in a row. I knew that if I twitched, if I fidgeted, or if I showed even a single crack in my composure, Caleb would see it. And if Caleb saw it, he would feed on it. Across the mahogany table, Caleb Richardson sat with the relaxed posture of a man who had already read the last page of the book and knew he was the hero. He adjusted his silk tie, the dark blue one I had bought him for our 5th anniversary, and shot me a look that was a terrifying mixture of pity and contempt. He looked handsome. That was the worst part. He looked like the successful investment banker everyone in our circle admired, the man who donated to charity auctions and held doors open for strangers. He did not look like a man who had systematically dismantled my sanity over the last 6 months. Beside him, his lawyer, Diane Mercer, was arranging her papers with the precision of a surgeon preparing to amputate a limb. Diane was a legend in Redmere divorce circles. She was known for being aggressive, theatrical, and utterly merciless. Caleb had hired her not just to win, but to make a statement. He wanted to scorch the earth so thoroughly that nothing would ever grow beneath my feet again. The judge, a stern woman named Honorable Edith Vance, adjusted her glasses and looked down at us. Diane Mercer stood up. She smoothed the front of her gray suit jacket and began her opening argument. Her voice was smooth, carrying a tone of disappointed morality that made my stomach turn. "Your Honor, we are here today because a marriage is a contract," Diane said, pacing slightly before the bench, "and like any contract, it relies on good faith. It relies on transparency. Mr. Richardson has upheld his end of that contract. He has been the primary earner, the rock of the household, and a devoted husband." She paused for effect, turning to look directly at me. I kept my chin high, staring past her ear. "However, Mrs. Richardson has not," Diane continued, her voice dropping to a register that suggested she was sharing a dirty secret. "We intend to prove that Mrs. Richardson engaged in an extramarital affair that not only destroyed the emotional fabric of this union, but also siphoned off marital assets to fund her illicit lifestyle. She has broken the trust. She has broken the vows. And because of this egregious conduct, we ask that the court award the bulk of the marital estate, including the primary residence and the investment portfolio, to Mr. Richardson." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I forced my breathing to remain steady. 1, 2, 3, exhale. I did not look at my own lawyer. "Marianne, we had discussed this. We knew they would play the adultery card. It was the oldest trick in the book when you wanted to shame a woman into a quick settlement. But knowing it was coming did not make it hurt any less to hear a stranger describe me as a cheater in a room full of people." Caleb leaned over the table toward me. The movement was slight, almost intimate, as if he were going to whisper a term of endearment. His eyes locked onto mine, cold and hard. "Say goodbye to your side piece," he whispered. His voice was low, barely audible over the hum of the ventilation system, but every word landed like a physical blow. He smirked, a small, tight curvature of his lips that vanished as quickly as it appeared. He was so sure. He was so incredibly confident that he had me cornered. He thought he knew everything. He thought he had intercepted my texts, tracked my location, and figured out my dirty little secret. I did not react. I did not blink. I simply shifted my gaze down to the silver watch on my left wrist. It was 9:15 in the morning. I was not looking at the time because I was bored. I was looking because I was counting down. Diane Mercer was still speaking, droning on about moral failings and the sanctity of marriage, but her words were becoming background noise. My heart rate picked up, thumping a heavy rhythm against my ribs. I needed the timing to be perfect. Everything depended on the next 60 seconds. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. The sound was loud, interrupting Diane mid-sentence. The heavy wood groaned against the hinges, and the rhythmic thud of expensive leather shoes against the floorboards echoed through the silent room. Heads turned. The court reporter paused her typing. Even Judge Vance looked up over the rim of her glasses, annoyed at the disruption. A man walked in. He was tall, dressed in a sharp charcoal suit that fit him with military precision. He carried a black leather briefcase in one hand and a thick, rigid black folder in the other. He did not look around the room. He did not apologize for being late. He walked with a singular purpose, moving down the center aisle toward the front of the courtroom. It was Noah Price. I felt a jolt of adrenaline surge through my veins. Noah looked exactly as he had the last time I saw him. Professional, detached, and utterly unreadable. His face was a mask of neutrality. He did not look at me. He did not even acknowledge my presence. He walked past my table as if I were a piece of furniture. Caleb let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound of pure triumph. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest, and looked at the judge with a grin that he didn't bother to hide. "Oh, there he is," Caleb said, loud enough for the stenographer to catch. "The boyfriend, the side piece. I wondered when he would show up to hold her hand." Diane Mercer looked confused for a moment, but then she smiled, following Caleb's lead. She clearly thought this was a gift. The lover had arrived to support the cheating wife, proving their point right there in the courtroom. "Your Honor," Diane said, gesturing grandly toward Noah, "if this is the man Mrs. Richardson has been seeing, perhaps we should swear him in immediately. His presence here is highly irregular, but it speaks volumes about the lack of remorse my client has been forced to endure." Noah stopped at the gate separating the gallery from the litigation area. He did not look at Caleb. He did not look at Diane. He kept his eyes fixed firmly on Judge Vance. He placed the black folder onto the edge of the defense table, the sound of it hitting the wood sharp and definitive. Then he straightened his tie. "I am not here to hold anyone's hand," Noah said. His voice was deep, calm, and projected clearly to every corner of the room. "And I am certainly not anyone's boyfriend." Caleb's smile faltered. Just for a fraction of a second. He looked at Noah, then back at me, then back at Noah. He was trying to process the information. In Caleb's narrative, I was the villain, and this man was my accomplice. He had convinced himself of it so thoroughly that reality was having a hard time breaking through. Noah opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, clipped together with heavy-duty binders. "I am Noah Price," he announced. "I am a forensic accountant and a certified fraud examiner. I was retained to conduct an independent investigation into the financial assets of Mr. Caleb Richardson and his associated entities." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Caleb's face went from smug to pale in the span of a single heartbeat. He sat up straight, his hands gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Diane Mercer recovered faster than he did. She slammed her hand down on the table. "Objection," she shouted. "Your Honor, this is an ambush. We have no record of this witness. We have received no discovery regarding a forensic accountant. This is a divorce hearing, not a criminal trial. This man has no standing here." Noah ignored her. He continued addressing the judge, his tone devoid of emotion. "Your Honor, I have a preliminary report here regarding the concealment of marital assets," Noah said, holding up the black folder. "This report details a series of transfers to offshore entities and shell companies that were not disclosed in Mr. Richardson's financial affidavit. Specifically, I have traced funds moving from the marital estate into a limited liability company known as Cedar Row Holdings." Caleb stood up. He actually stood up. knocking his chair back a few inches. "That is a lie." Caleb barked, his voice losing its polished veneer. "Who is this guy? I have never seen him before in my life. This is a setup. Violet hired an actor to come in here and slander me." Judge Vance banged her gavel. The sharp crack echoed like a gunshot. "Sit down, Mr. Richardson," the judge ordered. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Caleb remained standing for a second longer, his chest heaving, his eyes darting between Noah and me. He looked like a wolf that had walked into a trap it didn't know existed. Slowly, reluctantly, he sank back into his chair. "Ms. Mercer," Judge Vance said, turning her gaze to Caleb's lawyer. "Is it your position that you were unaware of any financial investigation?" "We were completely unaware," Diane stammered, flipping through her own files frantically. "This is highly prejudicial. We cannot proceed with unverified claims from a surprise witness." "Your Honor," Noah interjected smoothly, "the findings in this report suggest that the disclosure provided by the plaintiff was fraudulent. Under the state laws of Colorado, if there is credible evidence of asset dissipation or concealment, the court has the discretion to hear it immediately to prevent further loss of the marital estate. I have bank routing numbers, IP addresses, and digital signatures here." Judge Vance looked at Noah, then at the thick black folder he was holding. She was interested. I could see it in the way she leaned forward. Judges in family court hated two things above all else: being lied to, and people hiding money. "I will allow it," Judge Vance said. "Objection," Diane practically shrieked. "Overruled," the judge said, her voice turning icy. "If your client has nothing to hide, Ms. Mercer, then a financial report should not frighten him. Mr. Price, you may approach the bench and submit your findings into evidence." Caleb looked at me then, for the first time since the hearing began. He really looked at me. The arrogance was gone. The pity was gone. In their place was something darker, something sharper. It was fear. He looked at Noah, the man he had spent weeks mocking, the man he had told everyone was my lover, the man he thought he had successfully humiliated. He had been so sure that Noah was the instrument of my destruction. He had built his entire strategy around the idea that I was weak, that I was seeking comfort in another man's arms, and that he could use that against me. Noah walked past Caleb to the judge's bench. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who dealt in facts, not feelings. He didn't look at Caleb. He didn't offer a smug smile or a triumphant glance. He just did his job. I sat there, my hands still resting on my bag, my heart pounding a steady rhythm of victory. I watched Caleb realize that the narrative he had written was falling apart page by page. He had spent so much energy trying to catch me in a lie that he had forgotten to cover his own tracks. He thought he had taken my side piece. He thought he had exposed my shame. But as Noah handed the file to the judge, I knew the reality was far more dangerous for Caleb. He thought he had robbed me of a lover, but Noah had never been my lover. Noah was not there to offer me affection or comfort. He was not there to hold me at night. Noah was the mirror of truth, and for the first time in 8 years, Caleb was about to look into it and see exactly who he really was, to understand why the moment in that courtroom felt like taking my first breath of oxygen in years. You have to understand who I was before I became a plaintiff. I was not a woman who let things slip through the cracks. I was a project manager at Blue Hollow Systems, a logistics technology firm that moved massive amounts of freight across the globe. My entire career was built on precision. I managed supply chains that spanned 3 continents. If a shipping container was delayed in Singapore, I knew about it before the captain of the ship did. My days were a grid of color-coded spreadsheets, risk assessments, and contingency plans. I lived in reality. I dealt in facts. But when I went home, I entered a different world. A world designed entirely by Caleb Richardson. Caleb worked for Larkstone Capital Partners, a private equity firm that specialized in acquiring distressed companies and stripping them down for parts. He was good at it. He was terrifyingly good at it. To the outside world, he was the perfect specimen of the modern corporate husband. He was 37 years old, maintained a runner's physique, and wore suits that cost more than my first car. He had a smile that could disarm a room and a handshake that felt like a contract being signed. We had been married for 8 years. The first 2 years were a blur of expensive dinners and weekend trips to vineyards. It felt like a fairy tale. I thought I had found a partner who was as ambitious and driven as I was, but slowly, imperceptibly, the ground beneath my feet began to shift. It did not happen all at once. It was a gradual erosion, like water wearing down stone. It started with the money. Early in our marriage, Caleb suggested that he should handle the investments. He told me that since he worked in finance, it just made sense. He said he could get us returns that I would never find on the retail market. It sounded logical. I was busy with Blue Hollow, and he was the expert. So I agreed. Then came the joint checking account. Then came the scrutiny. By the 5th year, I was no longer a partner. I was an employee in my own marriage. Caleb would audit my spending with a casual cruelty that he disguised as financial prudence. We would be sitting at dinner, enjoying a glass of wine, and he would smile and ask why I had spent $60 at the grocery store on a Tuesday when he had already budgeted for the week. He would say things like, "You are lucky you have me. Violet, you are brilliant at logistics, but you are just not good with money. You let emotion drive your spending." He said it so often that I started to believe him. I stopped buying clothes without checking with him. I stopped suggesting vacations. I started hiding receipts for coffee because I did not want to endure the lecture about compound interest and wasted capital. He had drawn a circle around my life, and every year, that circle got a little bit smaller. There was only one thing I refused to let him touch. It was a ring. It was not the diamond engagement ring he had given me, which was flawless and cold. It was a thin gold band with a tiny chipped sapphire that had belonged to my mother. It was worth maybe $200 at a pawn shop, but to me, it was priceless. It was the only thing I had left of her. I wore it on my right hand, every single day. Caleb hated it. He would stare at it when we were out with his colleagues from Larkstone, his eyes narrowing in distaste. "Violet, honey," he would say, his voice dripping with fake affection. "Why do you insist on wearing that cheap thing? It ruins the aesthetic. I bought you a ring worth $10,000. Why insult me by wearing junk because it is mine?" I would say. He would just laugh. A low, dismissive sound. "You are so sentimental. It is a weakness. You know, sentimentality costs you leverage." I should have left him then. I should have packed my bags the first time he made me feel small for loving something he could not appraise. But I stayed. I stayed because we did not have children. And I convinced myself that marriage was about compromise. We had decided early on not to have kids. My career was demanding, and Caleb said he did not want to bring a child into a world he could not control. Looking back, I think he just did not want to share my attention. He wanted to be the only sun in my solar system, but the sun was starting to set on us. In the last 6 months, the air in our house had changed. It became charged with static, the kind you feel before a thunderstorm breaks. Caleb was physically present, but mentally, he was gone. He started taking sudden business trips. He would come home on a Tuesday and announce he had to leave for Chicago or New York within the hour. He would pack a bag with military efficiency, kiss me on the forehead, and disappear for 3 days. When he was home, his phone was always face down on the table. If a notification chimed, his hand would shoot out to cover it, a reflex faster than thought. I knew the passcode to his phone. It was his birthday. One night, while he was in the shower, I tried to unlock it just to check the time. It did not open. He had changed the password. When I asked him about it, he didn't even blink. "Security protocol from Larkstone," he said smoothly. "We are dealing with a sensitive merger. If my phone gets stolen, the firm could lose millions. You understand?" "Right," I nodded. But I did not understand. I managed sensitive data at Blue Hollow too, but I did not hide my phone from him. I had one lifeline outside of Caleb. Her name was Harper Lane. Harper was the opposite of Caleb. She was loud, chaotic, and brutally honest. We had been friends since college. She was the only person who looked at Caleb and saw a predator instead of a prince. We met for lunch on a rainy Thursday at a small bistro near my office. I was picking at a salad, distracted, while Harper decimated a plate of fries. "He is up to something," Harper said, pointing a fry at me. I sighed. "He is just busy." "Harper, Larkstone is closing a big deal in the tech sector. He is stressed." Harper rolled her eyes. "Violet, please. The man changes his phone password and starts flying to Chicago every other week. That is not a merger. That is a mistress. Or worse." "Worse?" I asked. "Secret family? Gambling debt? Embezzlement? Take your pick," she said. "Caleb always smells like secrets to me. He is too polished. Nobody is that perfect unless they are hiding a mess." I looked down at my mother's ring on my finger, twisting it round and round. I did not want to believe her. If I believed her, I would have to admit that the last 8 years of my life were a mistake. I would have to admit that I had let a man curate my reality until I no longer recognized it. "You are being paranoid," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Harper reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her expression softened. "Look, Vi, I am not trying to hurt you, but you are the smartest person I know. You run million-dollar logistics projects. If Caleb was a vendor you were managing, and he started acting like this, would you renew his contract?" I stayed silent. We both knew the answer. The breaking point did not come with a lipstick stain on a collar or a breathless phone call in the middle of the night. It came in the form of a mundane email notification. It was a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks after my lunch with Harper. Caleb was in his study, the door closed, supposedly on a conference call with investors in Tokyo. I was in the living room, clearing out my personal inbox on my laptop. A notification popped up from a bank I did not bank with. "Subject regarding your recent loan application. Reference number 894402. I frowned. I assumed it was spam. I moved my cursor to delete it. But something stopped me. The preview text showed my full legal name, Violet Elizabeth Richardson. Curiosity won out. I opened the email. "Dear Mrs. Richardson, thank you for your application for a personal line of credit in the amount of $50,000. We require a few additional documents to process your request. Please upload your recent pay stubs to the secure portal." My stomach dropped. I had not applied for a loan. We had a joint account with plenty of savings, or so Caleb told me. I had a credit card with a high limit. Why would I need a personal line of credit for $50,000? I read the email again. It listed the application date as yesterday. I stood up, my laptop still in my hand, and walked to the study door. I did not knock. I opened it. Caleb was not on a call. He was sitting at his desk, staring at his computer screen. When the door opened, he minimized the window so fast it was a blur. He spun his chair around, a flash of irritation crossing his face before he smoothed it into a welcoming smile. "Violet," he said, "I thought you were reading. Everything okay?" I walked over to the desk and turned my laptop screen toward him. "What is this?" I asked. He squinted at the screen, feigning confusion. He read the email slowly, taking his time. Then he leaned back and chuckled. "Oh, that," he said dismissively. "It is nothing. Just a phishing scam. Delete it. It has my full name. Caleb," I said, my voice tight, "and it has a reference number." I checked the header. "It is from a legitimate bank domain. It is not spam." He sighed, the sound of a patient parent dealing with a slow child. "Violet, hackers are getting sophisticated these days. They buy data in bulk. They probably got your name from that breach at the retail store last year. Don't worry about it. I will have the guys at Larkstone's IT department look at it if it makes you feel better." I looked at him, really looked at him. There was no concern in his eyes, only calculation. "I did not apply for this." I said, "I know you didn't." He said soothingly, "Why would you? We don't need money." But then he paused. A strange look crossed his face. He tilted his head to the side, studying me like a specimen in a jar. "Unless," he trailed off, "unless what I asked. Unless you did apply for it and forgot," he said. I stared at him. I froze. "Excuse me. Well, you have been under a lot of stress lately with that project at Blue Hollow," he said, his voice dropping to a gentle whisper. Last week you forgot to pick up the dry cleaning. The week before that, you forgot to pay the gardener. You have been scatterbrained. Violet, is it possible you clicked on an offer and didn't realize it? Or maybe you wanted to buy something big and didn't want to tell me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had not forgotten the dry cleaning. He had told me he would pick it up. I had not forgotten the gardener. He had told me he mailed the check. I did not forget those things. Caleb, I said, you said you handled them. He smiled. A sad, sympathetic smile that made my skin crawl. See, this is what I mean, he said. You are rewriting history again. I never said I would pick up the cleaning. I told you I had a meeting. Violet, honey, I am worried about you. You seem confused. I took a step back. The room felt suddenly cold. I am not confused. I said, and I did not apply for a $50,000 loan. Okay, he said, holding up his hands in surrender. Calm down. You are getting hysterical over a spam email. Just delete it. I will handle it. Trust me. He reached out to take the laptop from my hand. I pulled it back. No, I said, I will handle it. Caleb's eyes hardened. For a split second, the mask slipped. I saw something vicious underneath. Don't be difficult. Violet, he snapped. You are not good with this technical stuff. You will just make a mess. Give me the laptop. I turned around and walked out of the room. Violet, he called after me. Come back here. I went into the bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling. I looked at the email again. I looked at the loan amount, $50,000. And then I thought about what he had said. You are rewriting history. You are confused. You are hysterical. He was not just managing our money anymore. He was managing my perception of reality. He was planting little seeds of doubt in my mind, watering them with fake concern, waiting for them to grow into a forest so thick I would not be able to find my way out. He had lied about the dry cleaning. He had lied about the gardener. And now, he was lying about this. I looked down at my mother's ring. It was cold against my skin. I remembered something my mother used to tell me. She said that trust was like a mirror. Once it is broken, you can glue it back together, but you will always see the cracks in your reflection. Caleb thought he was clever. He thought he could tell me I was crazy, and I would believe him. He thought he could apply for loans in my name and convince me I had done it myself in a fugue state. But he had made a mistake. He had forgotten who I was at work. I was a project manager. I tracked discrepancies. I solved problems. And for the first time in 8 years, I realized that the biggest problem in my life was the man sleeping in the guest room down the hall. When someone says you are forgetful too many times, usually it means they are trying to erase what you actually know. They are trying to overwrite your hard drive with their own version of events. I closed the laptop. I did not delete the email. I was not forgetful. I was not crazy. And I was going to prove it. The next morning, I did not go to work. Instead, I drove straight to the main branch of the bank that had sent me the email. I sat in a leather chair across from a loan officer named Mr. Henderson, who looked far too young to be handling anyone's financial future. He turned his monitor toward me, his face pale with professional discomfort. I need you to look at the access log, I said, my voice steady. I need to know where that application came from. Mr. Henderson typed for a moment, the clicking of the keys sounding like gunshots in the quiet office. Mrs. Richardson, he said, clearing his throat. The application was submitted yesterday at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was signed using a secure digital key linked to your social security number. I looked at the screen. I saw the digital signature. It looked like my name, but it lacked the specific loop I always put on the V. It was a font, not a hand. I was asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, and look at the IP address. He highlighted a string of numbers. That is not a residential address, he admitted. That roots back to a server farm in Delaware. It is a masked connection. My heart went cold. A masked connection. Caleb worked in finance. He knew how to route traffic. He knew how to hide. This was not a glitch. This was identity theft. And the thief was sleeping in my bed. I printed everything: the application, the timestamp, the IP log. I folded the papers and put them in my purse. I felt a strange heaviness in my chest, the physical weight of betrayal. When I got home, Caleb was in the kitchen making coffee. The domesticity of the scene made me nauseous. He was wearing his running gear, looking healthy and vibrant, grinding beans as if he hadn't tried to put me $50,000 in debt while I slept. I slammed the papers onto the granite countertop. The sound made him jump. He turned around, the coffee grinder still buzzing in his hand before he switched it off. "Good morning to you too," he said. A tight smile plastered on his face. "I know you did it," I said. He put the grinder down. "Did what?" "Violet." "The loan," I said. "The digital signature. It was done at 3 a.m. You were the only other person in this house. You used my social security number. You tried to open a line of credit in my name." Caleb's face changed. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated annoyance. He didn't look guilty. He looked inconvenienced. "Violet, stop it," he snapped. "You are being ridiculous." "I am not being ridiculous," I shouted. "I have the logs." "Caleb, why do you need $50,000? What are you hiding?" He slammed his hand on the counter. The noise echoed through the kitchen, silencing me. "I am hiding nothing," he roared. "You are the one who is destroying this family." "Violet, you are obsessed. You are paranoid. You hunt for problems because you are miserable in your own skin." He walked toward me, invading my personal space. He loomed over me, using his height to intimidate. "You are checking up on me," he hissed. "You are going to banks behind my back. That is a violation of trust. Violet, that is a sickness. You are hallucinating crimes because you cannot handle the fact that I'm successful and you are just a project manager." I stood my ground, though my knees were shaking. "Gaslighting me won't work this time," I said quietly. "I know what I saw." He laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "You see what you want to see," he said. "You are hysterical. I can't do this anymore. I can't live with a woman who treats me like a criminal." He grabbed his keys and stormed out of the house. He did not come back for dinner. He did not come back to sleep in our bed. He slept on the couch that night. And when I came downstairs the next morning, he was gone. He disappeared for 6 hours. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. I texted him. No answer. I sat in the living room, staring at the wall, wondering if this was it, wondering if I had pushed him too far. For a brief, weak moment, I actually doubted myself. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was a hacker. Then the front door opened. Caleb walked in. He was calm. In fact, he was terrifyingly calm. He looked like a man who had just finished a very long, very satisfying workout. He hung up his coat. He walked into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. "Where were you?" I asked. He turned to me, his eyes blank. I was clearing my head. He said softly, "I realized something. Violet, we can't go on like this." I thought he meant we needed therapy. I thought he meant we needed to talk. But he didn't say anything else. He just went upstairs, packed a small bag, and moved into the guest room. He didn't yell. He didn't fight. He just detached. It was as if he had flipped a switch and turned off his feelings for me completely. 1 week later, I found out why. I was at work, sitting in a meeting about supply chain logistics for a new client in Brazil, when the receptionist knocked on the glass door. She looked apologetic. "Violet, there is someone here to see you," she said. I walked out to the lobby. A man I had never seen before handed me a thick manila envelope. "Violet Richardson?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "You have been served," he said. He turned and walked away. I stood there in the lobby of Blue Hollow Systems, holding the envelope. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I opened the flap. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner Caleb Richardson. Respondent Violet Richardson. I scanned the document, my vision blurring. He had filed. He had actually filed. But it wasn't the filing that made the bile rise in my throat. It was the reason. Under the section for grounds of divorce, he had checked the box for adultery, and in the typed addendum, it read, The petitioner alleges that the respondent has engaged in extramarital affairs, causing an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Adultery, I had never even looked at another man in 8 years. I went to work. I came home. I managed his life. I managed my life. I was boringly, painfully faithful. But then my phone started buzzing. It was a notification from Instagram, then a text from a mutual friend, Sarah, then an email from a cousin in Ohio. Violet, I'm so sorry to hear about everything. Caleb emailed us. If you need to talk, I am here. But, honestly, I am disappointed. Caleb wasn't just leaving me, he was burning me at the stake. I opened my laptop and logged into my personal email. There were 3 more messages from friends, all with the same confused, pitying tone. Caleb had sent out a mass communication. He hadn't said it directly. He was too smart for that. He had implied it. He had woven a narrative of a heartbroken husband dealing with a wandering wife. I just wanted you all to know that Violet and I are separating. He had written, I tried my best to forgive her for her indiscretions, but the trust is gone. Please respect her privacy during this difficult time. Indiscretions, plural. He was painting me as a serial cheater. I sat in my office and stared at the screen. I didn't cry. The shock was too absolute for tears. I realized then that the loan application wasn't just greed, it was a test. He wanted to see if I was watching, and when I caught him, he realized he had to accelerate his timeline. He was divorcing me to silence me, and he was accusing me of cheating to discredit anything I might say about his money. If I accused him of fraud later, he would just say I was a vengeful ex-wife trying to distract from my own affairs. It was brilliant. It was evil. I grabbed my phone and called Harper. He filed. I said, my voice cracking, I know. Harper said. She sounded furious. He sent the email to me, too. That son of a bitch. Violet, listen to me. Do not talk to him. Do not text him. Do not try to defend yourself to these people. He is saying I cheated. I whispered. He is projecting. Harper said. He's throwing sand in everyone's eyes so they don't see what he's doing. You need a lawyer, not a nice lawyer, not a mediator. You need a shark. I have never hired a lawyer. I said, I have. Harper said, I am sending you an address. Go there now. Her name is Marianne Holt. She ate my ex-husband for breakfast and picked her teeth with his bones. Go. 40 minutes later, I was standing in a high-rise building downtown. The office of Marianne Holt did not look like a place where families were reconciled. It looked like a place where wars were won. The furniture was chrome and white leather. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that kept you alert. Marianne Holt walked out to greet me. She was a woman in her 50s with short, silver hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses that framed eyes that had seen every possible variation of human cruelty. She wore a tailored suit that cost more than my first car. Mrs. Richardson. She said, come in. We sat in her office. I told her everything. I told her about the loan. I told her about the gaslighting. I told her about the divorce papers and the accusation of adultery. I laid it all out. A chaotic mess of emotions and facts. Marianne listened without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad with a fountain pen. She didn't offer me a tissue. She didn't offer me platitudes. When I was finished, she capped her pen and looked at me. Let me ask you a question. Violet, she said. Her voice was calm, clinical, like a surgeon assessing a tumor. Why does a man who earns a high 6-figure salary try to take out a $50,000 loan in his wife's name? I don't know. I stammered. Maybe he has gambling debts. Maybe, Marianne said. Or maybe he is moving liquidity. Tell me, has he been pushing you to sign anything else lately? Tax returns. Refinancing documents? No. I said, well, he handles the taxes. I just sign where he puts the sticky note. Marianne's eyes narrowed slightly. So you have no idea what your actual net worth is? She stated, it wasn't a question. I trust him, I said weakly. Or, I did. Marianne leaned forward. Caleb Richardson filed first because he wanted to control the jurisdiction and the narrative. She said, He accused you of adultery because in the court of public opinion, it puts you on the defensive. It makes you the villain. He is trying to rush this. He wants a quick settlement. He wants you to feel guilty, ashamed, and eager to escape." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But men like Caleb don't rush unless they are running from something." She added, "What is he running from?" I asked. Marianne tapped her pen against the desk. "Assets," she said. "I have been doing this for 30 years. Violet, when a man starts gaslighting his wife about her memory and projecting infidelity, it is rarely about sex. It is almost always about money. He is hiding something, a lot of something." I felt a chill go down my spine. "He told me I was bad with money." I said, "He told me I didn't understand it." "Of course he did." Marianne said, "That is how he kept you blind." "Violet, are you sure he isn't hiding assets?" I looked at my hands. I looked at the cheap band on my finger. "I only know," I began, my voice trembling. "I only know that I feel like I am being led, like I am walking down a hallway he built for me." Marianne nodded slowly. "Then we are going to pull on the reins," she said. "We are going to stop walking." She opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh file folder. "I can handle the legal filings," Marianne said. "I can block his motions and I can dismantle his accusation of adultery. But I am a lawyer, not a mathematician. If Caleb is moving money through shell companies or offshore accounts, I can't find it just by looking at tax returns." "What do we do?" I asked. "We need a specialist," Marianne said. "We need someone who can look at a spreadsheet and see the crime. We need someone who can follow the digital footprint that Caleb thinks he erased." She wrote a name on a sticky note and slid it across the desk toward me. "We need someone to see the money trail," she said. I looked at the name on the paper. It was just a name and a phone number. But in that cold, white office, it looked like a weapon. Caleb thought he had stripped me of everything. He thought he had taken my reputation, my confidence, and my future. But he had made one critical error. He had forced me to find the one person who could read the language he was speaking better than he did. I picked up the note. "I am ready," I said. Marianne Holt did not give me a comforting hug when she handed me the contact information for Noah Price. She gave me a warning. She told me that Noah was not a private investigator in the way people usually imagine them. He did not hide in bushes with a telephoto lens, and he did not hack into voicemails. He was a forensic accountant. He dealt in numbers, and numbers, according to Marianne, were the only things in a divorce case that did not have an emotional agenda. The meeting place Noah suggested was a diner called the Rusty Spoon, located off the interstate highway about 40 minutes from where Caleb and I lived. It was the kind of place that smelled permanently of bacon grease and stale coffee, with vinyl booths that had been patched with duct tape. It was perfect, because it was the last place on earth Caleb Richardson or anyone from Larkstone Capital Partners would ever be caught dead in. I arrived 10 minutes early, carrying a heavy tote bag filled with every financial scrap I could find. Bank statements I had managed to print before Caleb changed the passwords. Old tax returns I had found in the basement, and credit card receipts I had saved in a shoebox. I felt ridiculous, like a spy in a bad movie. Clutching my bag to my chest as I slid into a corner booth. Noah Price walked in at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He was not what I expected. I suppose I was expecting someone scruffy, or perhaps someone overly slick. Noah was neither. He was aggressively average. He wore a plain button-down shirt and trousers that were neat but inexpensive. He had brown hair, brown eyes, and a face that you would forget 5 seconds after looking at it. Marianne had told me this was his greatest asset. He was invisible because he was boring. He sat down across from me without shaking hands. He simply nodded and pulled a laptop out of a battered leather satchel. "Mrs. Richardson," he said. His voice was low and flat. "Marianne tells me you suspect asset dissipation." I pushed the tote bag across the sticky table. "I don't just suspect it," I said. "I know it. He tried to take out a $50,000 loan in my name. He has been moving money. I just don't know where it is going." Noah opened the bag and looked inside. He didn't flinch at the mess of papers. He looked at them with a strange sort of calm, like a mechanic looking at a broken engine. "We are not going to find a pot of gold," Noah said, pulling out a stack of statements. "Men like your husband don't bury treasure chests. They erode the mountain." "What does that mean?" I asked. He spread 3 bank statements out on the table. He took a pen from his pocket and circled a series of transactions. "Look here," he said. $2,000 to a consulting firm in March, $1,800 to a vendor for office supplies in April, $2,500 for logistics support in May. I squinted at the numbers. "Those are small amounts." I said, "Caleb makes huge deals. Why would he bother stealing $2,000 because of the radar?" Noah said, "In the banking world, any transaction over $10,000 triggers a mandatory report to the federal government. It is called a currency transaction report. But if you transfer $4,000, nobody blinks. If you do it 50 times over 2 years, you have moved $200,000. And no alarm bells ever rang." He looked up at me, his eyes sharp behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "We call it drizzle. Violet, a thunderstorm gets noticed. A drizzle just soaks you to the bone before you realize you are wet." I sat back against the vinyl seat, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. Drizzle, that was exactly what Caleb had done to my confidence, and now I knew it was exactly what he was doing to our life savings. Over the next 2 weeks, my life became a split screen. In one world, I was the terrified wife living in the guest room, avoiding Caleb in the hallways, pretending I was simply depressed and defeated. I went to work. I came home. I ate dinner alone. Caleb moved around the house with a swagger, talking loudly on the phone about how sad the situation was, painting himself as the martyr who was trying to keep the ship afloat while his wife had a mental breakdown. In the other world, I was meeting Noah at the Rusty Spoon every 3 days. We developed a routine. I would bring him anything new I could find, a piece of mail Caleb had left on the counter, a screenshot of a notification on his iPad that I caught before he swiped it away. Noah would take it, feed it into his laptop, and add another piece to the puzzle. He was finding a network. It wasn't just random spending. The money was flowing into a series of shell companies. There was one entity that kept appearing. A limited liability company called Cedar Row Holdings. Caleb had never mentioned it. It wasn't listed on our tax returns, but Noah found traces of it in the metadata of the transfers. It was terrifying, but it was also empowering. For the first time, I wasn't just the victim of Caleb's gaslighting. I was the one holding the flashlight, but I was terrified of being caught. Every time I drove to the diner, I checked my rearview mirror 100 times. I turned off the location services on my phone. I paid for my coffee with cash. I knew that if Caleb found out I was seeing a forensic accountant, he would destroy the evidence. He would burn the paper trail before we could map it. Or so I thought. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October. The sky was gray and threatening snow. I had just finished a long session with Noah. He had found a link between Cedar Row Holdings and a property management firm in a town called Ashford Creek. It was a huge breakthrough. We walked out of the diner together. I was feeling a rare moment of hope. I was listening to Noah explain the next step in the subpoena process. We were standing in the parking lot, the wind whipping my hair across my face, and then I saw the car. It was a silver sedan, identical to the one Caleb drove. It was slowing down on the frontage road that ran parallel to the diner. My heart stopped. I froze, my hand gripping the strap of my bag so hard my fingers ached. It was him. Caleb was behind the wheel. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking directly at us. He was close enough that I could see his face clearly through the driver's side window. I expected him to slam on the brakes. I expected him to scream. I expected the rage that I had seen in the kitchen when I confronted him about the loan. But he didn't stop. He slowed down just enough to make sure I saw him. And then he smiled. It wasn't a smile of jealousy. It wasn't the smile of a husband who had just caught his wife with another man. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. It was the smile of a poker player who had just been dealt the card he needed to complete a royal flush. He tapped the steering wheel, winked at me, and accelerated away, merging back onto the highway. I stood there, shaking. The wind felt like ice against my skin. He saw us. I whispered, "Noah, he saw us." Noah didn't look panicked. He watched the car disappear around the bend. "Did he take a picture?" Noah asked. "I don't know," I said, my voice rising in panic. "I don't think so, but he saw us. He knows. He knows I'm investigating him. He is going to shred everything. He is going to move the money." "We are too late." Noah turned to me. His face was completely impassive. "Violet, look at me," he said. I looked at him, my breathing shallow and fast. He didn't look angry, did he? Noah asked. "No," I said. He smiled. He looked happy. "Exactly," Noah said. I stared at him. Why would he be happy? He's hiding millions of dollars and I just caught him. Noah shook his head. "No," Noah said. "You didn't catch him. In his mind, he caught you." The realization hit me slowly. "He doesn't know who you are," I said. Noah nodded. "To him, I am not a forensic accountant. I am a man. I am a man meeting his wife at a seedy diner 40 miles from home in the middle of a workday. I am not a threat to his bank account. Violet, I am a gift to his legal case. He thinks you are my boyfriend." I breathed. "He thinks I am the side piece," Noah corrected. The drive home was a blur of anxiety. When I pulled into the driveway, I expected a confrontation. I expected Caleb to be waiting at the door with a lawyer and a locksmith. But the house was quiet, however. The neighborhood was not. Over the next 2 days, the atmosphere around me shifted. It started with the neighbor 2 doors down, Mrs. Higgins, usually. She waved when I got the mail. That day, she saw me and immediately turned her back, pretending to water her petunias. Then it was the text messages from our mutual friends. They stopped asking how I was. They stopped replying altogether. Caleb was working fast. He wasn't confronting me. He was performing. I found out from Harper that Caleb had gone for drinks with half the neighborhood husbands the night he saw me at the diner. He had apparently broken down in tears after 2 scotches. He told them he was devastated. He told them he had tried everything to save the marriage. But he had seen me with another man. He described Noah as some shady character I was meeting in secret. He didn't just tell them I was cheating. He told them I was abandoning him. I felt like I was being suffocated by a story I didn't write. I was the villain in my own life. Caleb was walking around with a halo of victimhood, and I was the adulteress who was tearing the family apart. I called Noah from a payphone at the library, my hands shaking as I held the receiver. "I can't do this," I said. "Everyone thinks I'm cheating. He is destroying my reputation. I need to tell them who you are. I need to tell them you are an accountant." "No," Noah said. His voice was sharp on the other end of the line. "But he is winning," I cried. "He is lying to everyone, Violet. Listen to me." Noah said, "This is the most dangerous part of the investigation. Right now, Caleb feels safe. He thinks he has the leverage. He thinks the worst thing you are doing is sleeping with some guy." So I asked, "So, when a man feels safe, he gets sloppy?" Noah explained, "If you tell him who I am, he will lock down every account within an hour. He will burn hard drives. He will transfer the funds to the Cayman Islands, where we can never touch them." "But I look like a monster," I whispered. "Let him paint you as a monster," Noah said. "Let him think he has you cornered. Let him think you are distracted by a romance. But he's going to use this in court." I said, "He is going to accuse me of infidelity." Noah paused. "Let him," he said. I was silent. The idea went against every instinct I had. I wanted to scream the truth. I wanted to defend my honor. "If you react now, you are bait," Noah said. "You are reacting to his story. You need to write the ending, Violet. And to do that, you have to let him believe he is the author of the beginning." I hung up the phone. I sat in the quiet library, surrounded by books, feeling the weight of the silence. Caleb thought he was so smart. He thought he had found my weakness. He looked at Noah and saw a lover. He looked at me and saw a traitor. He was so blinded by his own arrogance that he couldn't see the math. He was busy building a moral case against me, gathering sympathy from the neighbors, polishing his halo. He was so focused on destroying my character that he was forgetting to guard his flank. I drove home. I walked past Mrs. Higgins, who glared at me from her porch. I didn't look down. I didn't apologize. I walked into the house where Caleb was sitting in the living room, watching television. He looked at me with that same smug, triumphant smile. Late night at the office, he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Or were you occupied? I looked at him. I looked at the man I had loved for 8 years, the man who was currently robbing me blind and laughing about it. I was just working. Caleb, I said. He chuckled. Sure, Violet. Sure you were. He thought he had me. He thought he saw the whole board. I walked up the stairs, my hand gripping the banister. I didn't say a word. I let him have his moment. I let him have his little victory. Because Noah was right. Caleb was playing checkers. He was jumping pieces, making noise, drawing a crowd. But we were playing chess, and he had no idea that his king was already in check. The war did not start with a scream or a slap. It started with a declined debit card at a gas station on a Tuesday morning. I was standing at pump number 4, the cold wind whipping my hair across my face, staring at the small digital screen. Transaction denied. Contact issuer. I tried it again. I assumed it was a chip error. The magnetic strip on that card was old, but the screen blinked the same message again. I pulled out my backup credit card. The one we used for groceries and emergencies. Declined. A line of cars was forming behind me. A man in a pickup truck honked, his patience evaporating. My face burned with a heat that had nothing to do with the temperature. I had to walk inside, leave my license with the cashier, and pay with the $40 of emergency cash I kept in the glove compartment. When I got to my car, I called the bank. The automated voice told me the account was frozen due to a pending legal dispute. Caleb had filed an emergency motion for temporary orders. He claimed that I was dissipating marital assets, spending reckless amounts of money on my lifestyle, and he had asked the judge to freeze our liquid accounts until a hearing could be held. It was a lie. Of course, I hadn't spent a dime other than for gas and food. But the system was designed to protect the assets, not the truth. He had cut off my oxygen. I drove to work with the gas light still on, because $40 barely filled half the tank of my SUV. I felt small. I felt like a teenager who had been grounded, stripped of autonomy. But the humiliation at the gas station was just the appetizer. The main course was waiting for me at Blue Hollow Systems. I walked into the office at 9 o'clock. Usually, the logistics floor was a hive of noise phones ringing, people shouting across cubicles about shipping containers in Rotterdam or customs delays in Shenzhen. But when I walked in, the volume dropped. It wasn't silence, which would have been obvious. It was a sudden, collective dip in decibels. Heads turned toward computer screens a little too quickly. Eyes darted away. I walked to the break room to get coffee. 2 junior analysts were standing by the machine, laughing. They stopped the second I crossed the threshold. "Good morning," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was made of glass. "Morning, Violet," one of them mumbled, studying his shoes. They scrambled out of the room like I was contagious. I poured my coffee, my hand shaking slightly. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself that paranoia was a symptom of divorce, just like insomnia and weight loss. Then Gary walked in. Gary was a sales director. He was loud, abrasive, and had played golf with Caleb a few times at company mixers. He didn't get coffee. He just leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms over his chest. "Rough week." "Huh?" Gary asked. I didn't look at him. I stirred my black coffee. Everyone has rough weeks. "Gary?" I said neutrally. "Yeah, well," he said, letting out a short, dry chuckle. "I heard about what happened. Caleb sent an email to the guys from the last mixer. Said he is devastated. I turned to face him. I should have walked away, but I was tired. I was broke, and I was done being polite. Caleb likes to tell stories." I said. Gary shook his head, a look of mock disappointment on his face. "You know, Violet, he said, lowering his voice, I always thought you were the level-headed one, but destroying a man like that, wrecking a marriage for a fling, that is cold. I heard you really broke him. The words hit me like a physical slap. I heard you really broke him. The injustice of it was so sharp it almost cut my breath off. Caleb was the one freezing my accounts. Caleb was the one gaslighting me. Caleb was the one stealing from our future. And yet, here I was, standing in a fluorescent-lit break room, being judged by a man who didn't know the first thing about my life. I walked past Gary without saying a word. I went to my office and closed the door. I sat there for 10 minutes, staring at the wall, fighting the urge to scream. It wasn't the rumors that hurt. It was the theft of my narrative. Caleb had taken my voice before I even had a chance to speak. I left work early. I couldn't breathe in that building anymore. I drove straight to Marianne Holt's office. I didn't have an appointment, but the receptionist took one look at my face and waved me back. Marianne was on the phone, but she hung up when I walked in. I sat down and told her about the accounts. I told her about Gary. I told her that I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies. He is winning. Marianne, I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. Everyone believes him. He starved me out of my own bank account, and the world thinks he is the victim. Marianne took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Violet, listen to me, she said sternly. This is the playbook. This is page 1 through 10 of the narcissist's divorce manual. He destroys your character so that when the financial truth comes out, nobody cares. He wants you to react. He wants you to scream at Gary. He wants you to violate the court order so he can point a finger and say, see, she is unstable. But I have no money. I whispered, I have $40 in my wallet. Marianne opened a drawer and pulled out a checkbook. I am advancing you $5,000 against your settlement, she said, writing quickly. We will petition the court tomorrow for an emergency release of funds for living expenses. The judge will grant it. Caleb's motion was an ambush. But it won't hold up for long. She ripped the check out and slid it across the desk. They are attacking your image. Violet, she said, that is smoke. We are not going to fight smoke with smoke. We are going to attack the numbers. She pressed a button on her intercom. Send Noah in. Noah Price walked in a moment later. He looked exactly the same as always, bland, unreadable, and carrying that terrifyingly thick black folder. He sat down and didn't waste time with pleasantries. We found the link, Noah said. I sat up straighter. The link? Cedar Row Holdings. Noah said, I told you it was a shell company, but I couldn't prove Caleb controlled it. Now I can... He opened the folder and laid out a complex diagram. It looked like a spider web. Caleb was careful, Noah explained, tracing a line with his finger. He didn't put his name on the incorporation papers. He used a registered agent service in Nevada, but he made a mistake. He paid the annual renewal fee for the LLC domain name using a credit card. A personal card, I asked? No, Noah said. A corporate card from a defunct entity called Larkstone Ventures. It was a subsidiary of his firm that closed 3 years ago. He thought the account was dead and buried, but the digital receipt still had his work email listed as the recovery contact. I looked at the paper. It was a tiny thread, barely visible to the naked eye, but Noah had found it. This links him to the company, Noah said, and Cedar Row Holdings isn't empty. Violet, it holds the title to a condominium in a town called Ashford Creek, and it has received consulting fees totaling over $400,000 in the last 18 months. My mouth went dry. $400,000. That was our retirement. That was the money he said we didn't have. He is stealing $500,000, I whispered. At least, Noah said. And he is using the cheating wife story to distract everyone while he moves it. Just then, Marianne's assistant knocked on the door. She looked nervous. Ms. Holt, we just received the proposed settlement offer from opposing counsel. She said. Marianne took the document. She read it quickly, her face remaining impassive. Then she sighed. He wants to settle, Marianne said. He is offering you a flat payout. It is low, insultingly low, but he has included a specific demand for personal property division. She slid the paper toward me. I looked at the list. He wanted the furniture. He wanted the car. He wanted the art. And then I saw it. Item number 42. One antique sapphire ring. Gold band. Currently in possession of respondent. I stared at the words. The room seemed to tilt. He wants my mother's ring, I asked. My voice barely a whisper. I looked at Marianne. It is worth $200. Maybe less. Why does he want it? Marianne's expression softened. Just a fraction. Because he knows it hurts you, she said. He doesn't care about the ring. Violet, he cares that it matters to you. Taking it is a way to say he owns you. He owns your memories. Rage, hot and blinding, surged through me. I stood up. No, I said, absolutely not. He can have the house. He can have the car. But he is not touching that ring. I will burn it before I give it to him. Sit down. Violet, Marianne ordered. I didn't sit. I paced the small office. This is sick. He called it junk for 8 years. He mocked me for wearing it. And now he wants a court order to take it. Marianne stood up and walked around her desk. She put a hand on my shoulder. It was a firm, grounding grip. If you fight for it now, you tell him exactly where your wound is, she said. If you scream about the ring, he will know he has leverage. He will hold that ring hostage to make you sign away the $400,000 in Cedar Row holdings. So I just let him take it, I choked out. No, Marianne said. We note it. We ignore it for now. We pretend it means nothing to us. We don't show him what hurts. You cannot bleed in front of a shark. Violet. I swallowed hard. I looked at the ring on my finger. The tiny sapphire was chipped. It was the only thing I had left of the woman who raised me. Okay, I said, my voice shaking. We wait. 2 days later. The court scheduled a mandatory mediation session at the courthouse in Redmere. It was a procedural step, a chance for the lawyers to talk before the judge got involved. I arrived early. I was wearing my best suit, a navy blue blazer that made me feel like armor. I walked into the lobby, my heels clicking on the marble floor, and then I saw them. Caleb was standing near the security checkpoint. He looked immaculate, as always, but he wasn't alone. Standing next to him was a woman. She was younger than me, maybe 30. She was stunning. She had long blonde hair, legs that went on for miles, and she was wearing a white coat that looked like it cost more than my annual salary. She was laughing at something Caleb said, her hand resting lightly, possessively, on his arm. My breath hitched. That must be her. I thought, that must be the reason for the passwords, the trips, the coldness. Her name was Sienna Marsh. I didn't know her name then, but I would learn it soon enough. She looked up and saw me. She didn't look away. She didn't look guilty. She smiled. It was a smile of absolute victory. It was the smile of a woman who has already won the prize and is just waiting for the paperwork to clear. Caleb saw me looking. He turned, saw me, and then leaned in to whisper something in Sienna's ear. She laughed again. A bright, tinkling sound that echoed in the cavernous lobby. I felt like I was going to throw up. I wanted to run. I wanted to march over there and slap the smile off her face. Suddenly, a presence appeared at my elbow. It was Noah. I hadn't even seen him approach. Don't, Noah said softly. I looked at him. That is her, isn't it? That is who he is spending the money on. Noah looked at Sienna, then back at me. His expression was bored. Maybe, Noah said. Or maybe she is just a prop. A prop, I asked. Look at her. Noah, she is gorgeous. She is exactly his type. She is loud. Noah said, she is standing in the middle of a courthouse lobby with a man who is in the middle of a divorce. Touching his arm. Caleb is a finance guy. He is risk-averse. He hides things. If she were the real secret, she would be in a hotel room 3 towns over. Not putting on a show at security. I looked back at them. Caleb was practically preening. He wanted me to see her. She is smoke, Violet. Noah whispered. He wants you to focus on the blonde so you stop looking for the bank account. He wants you to be jealous so you stop being analytical. I thought, money is the fire. Money is the fire. Let's go, Noah said, guiding me toward the elevators. Keep your eyes on the spreadsheet, not the skirt. The mediation was a blur of legal jargon and posturing. I barely heard a word. All I could think about was that ring, and that woman, and the intricate web of lies Caleb had spun around me. That night, I moved into a small rental apartment on the south side of town. It was a studio with beige walls and a view of a brick alleyway. It smelled of industrial cleaner and loneliness. I sat on the floor, surrounded by a few boxes of clothes. I didn't have furniture yet. I didn't have a bed. I ate a sandwich from a deli wrapper, sitting cross-legged on the carpet. I looked at my hand. I took off my mother's ring. I held it up to the light. It was so small, so insignificant to the world. But it was mine. Caleb had taken my home. He had taken my money. He had taken my reputation. He had tried to take my sanity, and now he wanted to take my memory. He thought I was weak. He thought that because I had been a compliant wife for 8 years, I would fold under the pressure. He thought that by parading Sienna Marsh in front of me, I would crumble into a jealous wreck. He was wrong. I put the ring back on my finger. I pushed it down until it sat snug against the knuckle. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to make a scene in the break room. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me bleed. Noah was right. This was a game of chess, not a street fight. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the dark alley. If he wants to play dirty, I whispered to the empty room, then I will play clean. I will play with receipts. I will play with subpoenas. I will play with forensic audits. But I will play to the end. And when I am done, he won't just lose the game. He will lose the board. The email from Caleb arrived at 6:15 in the morning. It did not have a subject line. It just had an attachment labeled Settlement Proposal, Final Offer, and a short message in the body. Let's end this before you embarrass yourself further. I sat on the edge of my mattress in the studio apartment, shivering slightly because the radiator was hissing but producing no heat. I opened the attachment. It was brutal in its simplicity. Caleb was offering to let me keep my car and my personal effects. In exchange, I had to sign a document admitting to marital misconduct, specifically adultery, and waive all rights to spousal support, the house, and any future claims on his business assets. It was not a settlement. It was a confession. I met him 2 hours later at a coffee shop near his office. Marianne advised against it, but I needed to look him in the eye. I needed to see if the man I married was truly gone, replaced entirely by this corporate shark. Caleb was already there, sipping an espresso. He looked fresh, rested, and expensive. When I sat down, he didn't ask how I was. He pushed the paper toward me. "Sign it." "Violet," he said. His tone was casual, like he was asking me to sign a receipt for a package. "I am not signing a lie." "Caleb," I said, "I didn't cheat on you." He laughed, shaking his head with mock pity. "Does it matter?" he asked. "The truth is what you can prove. Violet, and right now, I have a narrative that works. Everyone knows you have a boyfriend. Everyone saw you with him. If we go to trial, I will parade that man across the witness stand and destroy you." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I am giving you an out," he said. "You sign this. You admit you made a mistake, and you walk away clean. No public trial. No nasty cross-examination. You get to keep your dignity, or at least what is left of it." I looked at him. I looked at the cruelty etched into the corners of his eyes. "My dignity is not for sale," I said, "and neither is the truth." Caleb's face hardened. He pulled the paper back and slid it into his briefcase. "Fine," he said. "Have it your way. But remember this moment. Violet, this is the moment you chose to lose everything. I have evidence, and by the time I'm done, you won't just be broke. You will be a joke." He stood up and walked away. I watched him go, feeling a cold knot of dread in my stomach. I thought he was bluffing. I thought he was just trying to scare me. I was wrong. 3 days later, Marianne summoned me to her office. Her voice on the phone had been tight, clipped. "Get here now," she had said. When I arrived, the atmosphere in the office was suffocating. Marianne was standing by the window, looking out at the city skyline. Sitting in the client chair, with his back to me, was Noah Price. I felt a wave of relief. Noah would know what to do. Noah would have the counter move. I sat down next to him. "What happened?" I asked, looking between them. "Did Caleb file a new motion?" Marianne turned around. She didn't look at me. She looked at Noah. "Tell her," she said. Noah turned his head slowly. He looked tired. For the first time since I met him, he refused to meet my eyes. He stared at a spot on the carpet near my shoes. "I can't work on your case anymore." "Violet," he said. I blinked. I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Is it the fee I can get more money? I can take a loan from my parents." "It is not the money," Noah said. His voice was flat, devoid of the sharp intelligence I had come to rely on. "Then what is it?" I demanded. "We are so close. Noah, we found the link to Cedar Row. We just need to subpoena the bank records. I have been retained by another client." Noah said. I stared at him. "So you can have more than one client, not when the client is a conflict of interest," Marianne interjected. Her voice was ice cold. I looked at her, then back at Noah. A conflict of interest? Who could possibly be a conflict of interest in a divorce case? And then, with a sickening lurch of my stomach, I realized, "No," I whispered. Noah finally looked at me. His expression was unreadable. "Diane Mercer contacted me yesterday," Noah said, "on behalf of Caleb Richardson." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "He hired you," I choked out. "Caleb hired you." "He made an offer," Noah said. "He wants to retain my firm to conduct a forensic audit of his own companies, to prove, proactively, that his finances are in order. That is a lie." I shouted, standing up. "He is hiring you to shut you up. He knows you found the shell company." Noah remained seated. He didn't flinch at my outburst. "It is a valid contract." "Violet," he said, "and the retainer he offered is substantial." I looked at him with horror. I thought Noah was different. I thought he was the one person in this mess who cared about the facts, about the truth. But in the end, he was just another line item on a spreadsheet. "He bought you," I said, my voice shaking. "He thinks you are my lover, so he bought you to take you away from me." Noah didn't answer. He just started packing his briefcase. "I am legally obligated to recuse myself from your team effective immediately," he said. "I will transfer all the files I have gathered so far to Marianne. Good luck, Violet." He stood up and walked out of the office. He didn't look back. I stood there, trembling. I felt like I had been stabbed in the back by the only person guarding it. Harper came over to my apartment that night. When I told her, she threw a wine glass against the wall. It shattered, sending shards of glass and red wine everywhere, looking like a crime scene on my cheap beige carpet. "That traitor," Harper screamed. "That absolute snake, I knew it. I knew men were trash. But this is a new level. He sold you out for a paycheck." I sat on the floor, picking up the pieces of glass. I was too numb to scream. "Caleb won," I whispered. He was right. He said he would take everything. He took the house. He took the money. And now he took the only weapon I had. Harper dropped to her knees and grabbed my shoulders. "He didn't take your weapon, Vi," she said fiercely. "You are the weapon. We will find another accountant. We will find someone better." But we both knew that was a lie. Noah wasn't just an accountant. He was a specialist. He knew where the bodies were buried because he had already started digging the graves. Starting over with someone new would take months I didn't have and money I couldn't spend. The next morning, the rumors at work exploded. I walked past the sales desk and heard Caleb's name. I heard laughter. Apparently, Caleb wasn't keeping his victory quiet. He had told a mutual friend, who told a coworker, who told everyone, that he had handled the situation. I took her side piece. Caleb had reportedly bragged at a bar the night before. "Cost me a pretty penny, but money talks. Now she has nobody." He was gloating. He was confirming exactly what I suspected. He didn't hire Noah because he needed an audit. He hired Noah to humiliate me. He wanted to show me that everyone has a price. He wanted to prove that loyalty is a myth that poor people tell themselves to feel better. I went home early again. I couldn't face the pitying looks. I sat in my apartment as the sun went down. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of the city outside. Cars honking, sirens wailing, people living lives that didn't involve forensic audits and betrayal. This was the dark night. I started to question everything. Maybe Caleb was right. Maybe I was stupid. I had let him control the finances for 8 years. I had signed papers without reading them. I had trusted him blindly. And then, when I finally tried to fight back, I trusted a stranger I met in a diner. I was a project manager who couldn't manage her own life. I was a logistics expert who had lost the shipment. My phone rang. It was Marianne. I almost didn't answer. I didn't want to hear any more bad news, but I picked it up. "Violet," Marianne said. Her voice was different. It wasn't the sharp, lawyer voice. It was thoughtful. "I'm going to quit," I said, my voice thick. "I can't do this. Marianne, he has more money. He has more power. He just bought my expert witness. I should just sign the settlement. I should just take the car and go. Don't you dare." Marianne said, "Why not?" I cried. "What is the point? Listen to me." Marianne said, "I have been thinking about what happened in my office today." "What is there to think about? He sold out." "Did he?" Marianne asked. I frowned in the dark. "Yes, he took the job." Marianne paused. "Violet, Noah Price has a reputation. He is obsessive. He is rigid. In 20 years, I have never heard of him dropping a case for a higher offer. It goes against his entire psychological profile. People change when you wave 6 figures in their face," I said bitterly. "Maybe," Marianne said. "Or maybe he realized something. What if he stays on your team? He is outside the castle walls trying to look in." Marianne said, "He has to fight for every scrap of paper. He has to subpoena every document. So, Marianne continued, her voice dropping lower. "If he works for Caleb, he is inside the castle. He has the keys. He has access to the server. He has the passwords." I sat up straight. "Are you saying—" I started. "I am saying that if Noah is truly a traitor, we will destroy him," Marianne said. "I will report him to the ethics board and have his license stripped. But if he is not, if he is the man I think he is, then you need to trust the play. Trust the play I asked." He left me. "Marianne, sometimes you have to leave the formation to sack the quarterback." She said, "Go to sleep. Violet, do not sign anything." I hung up the phone. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But hope felt dangerous. Hope felt like the thing that got you killed. I lay down on the floor, staring at the ceiling. I checked my phone one last time before turning it off. There was a new message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. No name, no photo. I opened it. There were only 5 words. "Don't call. Follow the plan." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. My heart hammered against my ribs. Follow the plan. What plan? We didn't have a plan for this. The plan was to subpoena the records. The plan was to expose Cedar Row. Unless this was the plan, I thought back to the diner. I thought back to Noah telling me not to react when Caleb saw us. "Let him think he has you cornered." Noah had said, "Let him feel safe." Caleb thought he had just won the war. He thought he had stripped me of my armor. He thought he had bought the only man who could hurt him. But what if he hadn't bought a mercenary? What if he had just invited the enemy into his war room? I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. My reflection in the glass looked tired. My eyes were shadowed. I looked like a woman who had lost everything. But I wasn't lost. I looked at the text message again. I didn't reply. I didn't call. I simply deleted the thread. Caleb wanted me to scream. He wanted me to beg. He wanted me to fall apart so he could point and say, "Look, she's crazy." I wasn't going to give him that. I touched the ring on my finger. It was cold and hard, just like the resolve settling in my chest. If Noah was inside, then I had to be the distraction outside. I had to be the defeated ex-wife. I had to let Caleb gloat. I had to let him think he was the king of the world. Because the higher he climbed, the harder he would fall when the floor was pulled out from under him. I went to the bathroom and washed my face. I brushed my hair. I looked at myself in the mirror. You are not the victim. I told my reflection, you are the bait. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like crying. I felt a cold, quiet calm. There are times when revenge does not need to be loud. It does not need a gun or a scream. Sometimes, revenge is just the patience to stand still in the right place while your enemy digs his own grave. I turned off the light and went to sleep. The game was not over. In fact, the real game had just begun. The hardest part of the plan was not the silence, it was the performance. For the next 2 weeks, I had to wake up every morning and put on the costume of a woman who had been thoroughly beaten. I wore less makeup. I stopped wearing my heels and switched to flat, sensible shoes that made me feel small. I walked through the corridors of Blue Hollow Systems with my shoulders slumped, avoiding eye contact, letting the whispers of my colleagues wash over me without reacting. When I saw Caleb's friends or allies, I made sure to look tired. I made sure to look like I was barely holding it together. And it worked. Caleb was thriving. He was glowing. He strutted around town like a rooster who had just chased off a fox. He thought he had severed my lifeline. He thought that by hiring Noah Price, he had blinded me. He did not realize that he had just handed a flashlight to the only man who knew exactly where to look in the dark. Noah was officially working for Caleb now. He was billing Larkstone Capital Partners an exorbitant hourly rate to conduct a preemptive internal audit, ostensibly. This was to prove to the court that Caleb's finances were impeccable. In reality, Noah was inside the firewall, while I was sitting in my empty apartment eating instant noodles. Noah was sitting in Caleb's conference room, drinking Caleb's coffee, and accessing the servers that I had been locked out of for years. The first breakthrough came in the form of a heavily encrypted email sent to Marianne's personal server. I was in Marianne's office when she opened it. It was a digital comparison sheet. Noah had done something brilliant. He had taken the public tax returns Caleb filed, the ones that showed a modest but comfortable income, and laid them over the internal ledger of Cedar Row Holdings. "Look at this," Marianne said, pointing to a column of numbers. I leaned in. "Consulting fees." I read out loud. "Received from Vector Logistics. Vector Logistics does not exist," Marianne said. She tapped her keyboard. "Noah ran a background check on it. It is a shell company registered in Delaware. It has no employees, no office, no website. So where does the money come from?" I asked. Marianne traced the line back. "Larkstone." She said, "Caleb is diverting commission bonuses from his main job into Vector Logistics. Then Vector pays Cedar Row Holdings for consulting. It is a classic laundering cycle. He is taking his own income, washing it through 2 dummy corporations, and depositing it into an account that you do not know exists." I looked at the totals. $12,000 here, $8,000 there. It added up fast. "But here's the smoking gun," Marianne said, scrolling down. She pointed to an email thread that Noah had captured. It was dated just 3 days ago, right after Noah had been hired, from Caleb Richardson, to internal accounting subject. "Clean up Noah Price is doing a sweep. Make sure the old entries regarding the Ashford Creek property maintenance are reclassified as office expenses. We do not want any red flags." I felt a chill go through me. "He is instructing them to hide it," I whispered, "and he's telling them to hide it from Noah, while Noah is standing right there reading the email. He thinks Noah is just a hired gun." Marianne said, "He thinks Noah will glaze over office expenses because that is what he is being paid to do. He does not know Noah is cataloging every deletion." Marianne leaned back in her chair, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "We have him on intent. Violet, this proves he is actively concealing assets during a divorce proceeding. That is fraud." "But what about the Ashford Creek property?" I asked. "What is that?" Marianne pulled up another document from Noah's drop. "It is a townhouse," she said. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, purchased 18 months ago under the name of Cedar Row Holdings. The down payment was $120,000. I stared at the photo of the townhouse. It was beautiful. It had a porch. It had flower boxes. It looked like the kind of home we had talked about buying 5 years ago, before Caleb told me we couldn't afford to upgrade. $120,000. I repeated. That was the money I saved. I said, my voice shaking. That was the bonus from the Singapore project. That was the money from my grandmother's inheritance. He told me he put it in a long-term bond. He told me we couldn't touch it for 10 years. I wasn't jealous of a mistress. I didn't care if he was sleeping there with Sienna Marsh or the Queen of England. I was heartbroken for the hours I had worked. I was mourning the late nights at the office, the missed holidays, the sacrifices I had made to build a future that he had stolen brick by brick to build a bachelor pad. He stole my time. Marianne, I said, tears pricking my eyes. He didn't just steal money. He stole 8 years of my labor. Marianne handed me a tissue. We are going to get it back, she said, and we are going to get it back with interest. But first, we have to get him under oath. The deposition was scheduled for the following Thursday. A deposition is a trap disguised as a conversation. The goal is not to scream at the other person. The goal is to ask them boring, repetitive questions until they commit to a version of the truth that you can later prove is a lie. Marianne prepared me. You are going to sit there and look defeated. She said, you are not going to ask questions. You are going to let me do the talking. I am going to ask him about his schedule, his habits, his credit cards, why I asked, because we need him to say, on the record, that he has no other properties. Marianne explained, we need him to say, under penalty of perjury, that Cedar Row Holdings is not his, once he lies on the transcript. We own him, the day of the deposition. I sat across from Caleb in a glass-walled conference room. Diane Mercer, his bulldog lawyer, sat next to him. She looked bored. Caleb looked annoyed. He checked his watch 3 times in the first 5 minutes. Let's get this over with, he said. I have a meeting at 2. Marianne smiled politely. She opened her notebook. Mr. Richardson, do you have any financial interest in any entities other than those listed in your affidavit, she asked. No, Caleb said. Are you the beneficiary of any trusts or holding companies? No. Do you own any real estate outside of the marital home? Caleb sighed, rolling his eyes at Diane. No, he said. How many times do I have to answer this? Just for the record, Marianne said soothingly. And what about your travel schedule? Do you frequently travel to Ashford Creek? Caleb froze, just for a microsecond. His eyes flickered. Ashford Creek? He repeated. No. Why would I go there? It is a ski town. I don't ski. Okay, Marianne said, writing it down. So you have never been to Ashford Creek in the last 2 years? Never, Caleb said firmly. I looked down at my hands to hide the triumph in my eyes. He had just hammered the first nail into his own coffin. Noah had GPS logs from the rental car company showing Caleb drove to Ashford Creek 12 times in the last year. We had him, but the game was getting dangerous. Caleb was arrogant, but he wasn't stupid. He started to get a feeling that something was wrong. Maybe it was the way Marianne smiled. Maybe it was the fact that I wasn't fighting over the furniture. He decided to test the leak. 2 days after the deposition, Noah sent a frantic message to Marianne via an encrypted chat app. He is testing me. He gave me a file labeled Project Blue. It contains records for an offshore account in the Cayman Islands with $2 million. Marianne called me immediately. It is a canary trap, she said. What is a canary trap? I asked. He gave Noah a fake document, Marianne explained. If that document shows up in court, if I mention the Cayman Islands account, Caleb will know Noah gave it to me, because Noah is the only person who has seen it. My heart started to race. So what do we do? I asked. If we ignore it, and it is real, we lose $2 million. It is not real. Marianne said. Noah checked the routing numbers. They are invalid. It is a dummy file designed to catch a rat. So Noah has to ignore it. Marianne said. Noah has to play it back. The next day, Noah walked into Caleb's office. I wasn't there. but Noah recounted the scene to Marianne later. Noah placed the Project Blue file on Caleb's desk. "Mr. Richardson," Noah said, keeping his face blank, "I analyzed this file you gave me." Caleb leaned back, watching him closely. "Yes, it is garbage," Noah said. "The routing numbers don't work. This account doesn't exist. If you're trying to hide assets here, you did a bad job, or someone scammed you." Caleb stared at him for a long moment. He was looking for a flinch. He was looking for a sign that Noah had run to me with the information. Then, Caleb laughed. "Good catch. Price," Caleb said. "I was just testing your diligence. Wanted to make sure you were actually checking the numbers and not just billing me for the hours. I passed," Noah said dryly. "Can I get back to work now?" Caleb waved him away. He was satisfied. He thought Noah was loyal because Noah had debunked the fake asset instead of weaponizing it. But Caleb was still suspicious of me. He couldn't understand why I was so quiet. He expected me to be screaming about Sienna Marsh. He expected me to be fighting for the china and the silver. My silence was making him nervous. "He needs to think you are breaking." Marianne told me, "We need to give him a win." So we orchestrated a moment of weakness. I went to the storage unit where Caleb had moved some of his personal effects. Harper went with me. We knew Caleb had cameras monitoring the entrance. I stood in front of the storage unit door and pretended to cry. I slumped against the metal door, looking defeated. Harper put her arm around me, acting the part of the concerned friend. "Come on." "Vi," Harper said loudly enough for the microphone to pick up. "He won. Let's just go. There is nothing left here. We didn't just act." Harper actually snapped photos of the boxes inside, while I distracted the camera with my breakdown. We saw labels on the boxes. Ashford Creek, Master Bedroom, and Tax Records. 2021 to 2023. Physical evidence. Caleb saw the footage. He saw me crying. He saw me giving up. That night, he texted me. "Saw you at the storage unit. Sad sight. Violet, just sign the papers. Stop torturing yourself." He took the bait. He thought I was finished. He didn't know that while I was crying at the storage unit, Marianne was drafting a subpoena for the bank records of Cedar Row Holdings, using the specific account numbers Noah had verified from the inside. We were moving fast now. The court date was approaching. Caleb thought he was walking into a coronation. He thought he was going to walk into that courtroom, present his forensic audit from Noah showing he was clean, and walk out with all the money and his new girlfriend. He had no idea that the report Noah was writing for him was not the same report Noah was writing for the judge. The night before the final hearing, I met Marianne in her office. The mood was electric. "We have everything," Marianne said. She laid out the timeline, the fake consulting fees, the emails instructing the cover-up, the GPS logs, the real estate deed, the flow of funds. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. It was a map of greed. But the most satisfying part was the text message Noah sent to Marianne's burner phone right as we were packing up. He just asked me to destroy the hard drive. Noah wrote, "He told me to wipe the server and drill the physical disk before court tomorrow. He thinks he is cleaning the crime scene." Marianne typed back, "Did you do it?" Noah's reply came 3 seconds later. "I swapped the drive. I drilled a blank one. The original is in my briefcase. See you in court." I looked at the message and felt a surge of adrenaline that made my hands shake. "He tried to delete the evidence," I said. Marianne nodded. "And by doing that, he proved that he knew he was guilty. Spoliation of evidence is a serious charge." "Violet," she looked at me, her eyes fierce. "He thinks he stole your side piece," she said. "He thinks he bought Noah Price and took away your only weapon." She closed the file with a sharp snap. "Actually," she said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips, "he just handed us the keys to the safe, and he paid us to rob it." The call came at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, slicing through the quiet tension of my workday like a siren. It was my mother's neighbor, Mrs. Gable. Her voice was high and thin with panic. She told me the ambulance was already there. She told me my mother had collapsed in her garden while pruning the roses. I drove to St. Jude's Hospital with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My mother was 68 years old. She was tough. She was the kind of woman who walked 3 miles a day and refused to take aspirin for a headache. But the last 3 months had aged her. The shame of my divorce, the rumors Caleb had spread, the whispers in our small community, it had all landed on her shoulders just as heavily as it had landed on mine. When I walked into her hospital room, she was sleeping. She looked terrifyingly small in the hospital bed, hooked up to a monitor that beeped with a steady, rhythmic sluggishness. The doctor told me it was exhaustion. He said her blood pressure had spiked dangerously high. He said she needed rest. He said she needed peace. Peace. The word echoed in my head, mocking me. There was no peace in my life. There was only strategy, subpoenas, and the constant, grinding noise of a war I hadn't started but was forced to fight. I sat in the plastic chair beside her bed and held her hand. It felt frail. I looked at the bruise on her arm where the IV needle had gone in. I did this. I thought. The guilt washed over me, heavy and suffocating. If I had just signed the papers months ago, none of this would be happening. If I had just let Caleb win, my mother would be tending her roses right now, not lying in a hospital bed with a heart monitor strapped to her chest. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I knew who it was before I looked. It was a sixth sense I had developed, a physical reaction to his intrusion into my space. I pulled the phone out. It was a text from Caleb. Heard about your mom. Send her my best. Look, Violet, this has gone on long enough. People are getting hurt. Just sign the agreement. I will leave you alone. I promise. I stared at the screen. I will leave you alone. It sounded like an offering. It sounded like mercy. For a moment, a weak, desperate moment, I wanted to take it. I wanted to text him back and say yes. I wanted to stop the bleeding. I wanted to go back to being the woman who didn't check bank logs at midnight, the woman whose mother wasn't collapsing from stress. He was offering me an exit door. All I had to do was admit to a lie, give up my financial future, and walk away. I walked out into the hallway, needing air. I called Marianne. He knows about my mom. I said, my voice trembling. He texted me. He said if I sign, he will leave me alone. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Violet, look at me, Marianne said, even though she wasn't there. Do you believe him? I don't know, I whispered. I just want it to stop. Marianne, my mom is in a hospital bed because of this. Maybe he is right. Maybe I am dragging this out for nothing. Marianne's voice turned hard. It wasn't unkind, but it was unyielding. He is not offering you peace, Violet. He is offering you a cage. What does that mean? I asked. If you sign that paper admitting to adultery, you are giving him a weapon he will keep forever. She said, he won't leave you alone. He will hold it over you every time you try to rebuild. If you get a new job, he will whisper that you are unstable. If you meet someone new, he will tell them you are a cheater. She paused. He is not trying to end the war, Violet. He is trying to get you to surrender unconditionally so he can occupy your territory forever. I will leave you alone, is what a predator says to prey right before the trap snaps shut. I leaned my head against the cold hospital wall. But I am tired. Marianne, I said, I am so tired. I know, she said softly. That is why he sent the text now. He waits until you are weak. That is his pattern. Think back. Violet, when did he usually ask you to sign things? When did he usually make you feel small? I closed my eyes. I thought back to the last 8 years. I remembered a Tuesday night 3 years ago. I had the flu. I was running a fever of 102 degrees. Caleb had come into the bedroom with a stack of tax documents. Just sign here. Honey, he had said, you are too sick to read it. Trust me. I had signed. I remembered the time I lost my keys. I had searched the entire house for 2 hours. Crying because I was late for a meeting, Caleb had sat on the couch, watching me, shaking his head. You are getting so forgetful. Violet. He had said, I worry about your mind. 2 days later, he found the keys in his own coat pocket. He didn't apologize. He laughed. "You must have put them there," he said. "You are so confused lately." I remembered the dinner parties where he would tell stories about me, stories that were mostly true but twisted just enough to make me look incompetent. "Violet tried to cook a roast," he would say, "and nearly burned the house down." Everyone would laugh. I would laugh too, even though I knew the oven timer had broken. He had spent 8 years editing my reality. He had spent 8 years convincing me that I was the problem, that I was broken, that I needed him to interpret the world for me. Marianne was right. If I signed that paper, I wasn't just losing the money. I was agreeing with his version of the story. I was signing a legal document that said, yes, Caleb Richardson is the hero, and Violet Richardson is the villain. I looked back through the glass window at my mother. She had raised me to be honest. She had raised me to stand up straight. If I signed that lie, I wouldn't be saving her. I would be disappointing her. I took a deep breath. "I am not signing." I told Marianne. "Good," Marianne said. "Now get some rest. Tomorrow is the end game." I stayed at the hospital until 8 o'clock at night. When I left, the parking garage was dark and smelled of damp concrete. My footsteps echoed loudly in the emptiness. I walked toward my car, my keys clutched in my hand like a weapon. Suddenly, a pair of headlights flashed twice from the back corner of the lot. I froze. A dark sedan was parked in the shadows. The window rolled down halfway. "Get in," a voice said. It was Noah. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked around. The garage was empty, but I felt like 1,000 eyes were watching. I walked over to the car. I didn't get in. I just leaned down to the window. "Are you crazy?" I hissed. "If he sees you here, he won't." Noah said, "He is at a dinner with the partners from Larkstone. He thinks I am at my office shredding hard drives." Noah looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes that matched mine. He wasn't wearing his usual suit. He was wearing a black hoodie, looking more like a hacker than a forensic accountant. He held out his hand. In his palm was a small silver USB drive. "Take it," he said. I stared at it. "Is this it?" I asked. "It is everything," Noah said. "The original ledger, the deleted emails, the real bank statements from Cedar Row, and the metadata showing he accessed the account from his work computer this morning." I reached out and took the drive. The metal was warm from his hand. "Why are you doing this?" I asked him. "I needed to know. Why risk it? You have the money. You could have just walked away." Noah looked at me. His eyes were dark and serious. "My father was a gambler," Noah said quietly. "He was charming. He was smart. And he convinced my mother she was crazy every time money went missing. She died thinking she had lost the family fortune because she was bad at math." He looked away, staring at the concrete wall. "I don't like bullies. Violet," he said, "and I really don't like men who use money to make women feel small." He turned back to me. "Tomorrow, in court, Diane is going to call me to the stand." He said, "She is going to expect me to bury you." I nodded, clutching the USB drive. "What happens if you fail?" I asked. "What happens if the judge doesn't let you speak? What happens if Caleb wins?" Noah gave me a small, grim smile. "Then he wins," Noah said. "But at least you will know." "Know what?" I asked. "You will know you aren't crazy," he said. "You will know that for once in your life, you were right and he was wrong." He rolled up the window. "Go," he said through the glass. "Don't look back." I drove back to my apartment with the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. It was the calm of the deep ocean, dark and heavy and powerful. I walked into my tiny, empty apartment. I didn't turn on the main lights. I just turned on the small lamp on the floor. I sat down and placed the USB drive on the carpet. Next to it, I placed the only other valuable thing I owned. It wasn't the sapphire ring this time. It was an old, leather-strapped watch that had belonged to my father. It had stopped working 10 years ago. The hands were frozen at 4 o'clock. I looked at the two objects. The watch represented time, the time I had lost, the 8 years of marriage where I had slowly disappeared. The USB drive represented the truth. Caleb had tried to buy the truth. He thought truth was a commodity, like a stock or a bond. He thought he could shape it, hide it, and sell it. But he forgot that truth is like water. You can build a dam, but eventually, the pressure builds. Eventually, the dam breaks. I picked up the USB drive and held it tightly in my fist. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't afraid of poverty. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I wasn't even afraid of losing the case. I realized then that the victory wasn't about the money. I didn't care about the condo in Ashford Creek. I didn't care about the investment accounts. I cared about the story. For 8 years, Caleb had been the narrator of my life. He had told me who I was. He had told me I was forgetful. He had told me I was bad with money. He had told me I was lucky to have him. Tomorrow, I was going to take the pen back. I walked to the bathroom mirror. I looked at myself. I looked tired. My hair was messy. My eyes were red. I didn't look like a winner, but I looked real. Caleb, I whispered to the empty room. You chose this. You chose to push me into the corner. You chose to make me the villain. I leaned closer to the mirror, my breath fogging the glass. You chose to turn me into a traitor, I said, so I will turn you into the truth. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to the wind rattle the window pane, waiting for the sun to rise on the day that would end everything. The mediation room at the courthouse was windowless and smelled of stale coffee and aggressive cologne. We sat on opposite sides of a long, scratched oak table. On one side, there was Caleb and Diane Mercer, looking like a pair of sharks circling a wounded seal. On the other side, there was just me and Marianne Holt. Caleb was putting on the performance of a lifetime. He sat with his shoulders hunched, his head in his hands, looking for all the world like a man broken by heartbreak. He sighed loudly every time Marianne spoke. He rubbed his temples as if the mere presence of his cheating wife was giving him a migraine. We are wasting time, Diane said, slapping a folder onto the table. My client has been generous. He has offered a settlement that allows Mrs. Richardson to walk away with her dignity intact. But if you insist on dragging this out, we have no choice but to put the evidence on the record. She opened the folder and fanned out 5 photographs on the table. They were grainy, taken with a telephoto lens, but the subjects were unmistakable. It was me and Noah, standing in the parking lot of the Rusty Spoon. In one photo, the wind was blowing my hair across my face, and Noah was leaning in, looking like he was whispering something intimate. In another, I was handing him a stack of papers, which, from a distance, looked like a gift or a love letter. Diane tapped a manicured fingernail on the photo where Caleb was driving by in the background. We have the timeline, Diane said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Mrs. Richardson claims she was working late. In reality, she was meeting her lover at a roadside diner 40 miles away. We have witnesses who saw them together multiple times. We have the text logs showing calls to a burner phone. Caleb looked up then. He looked at me with eyes that were wet with fake tears. Why, Violet? He asked, his voice cracking perfectly. I gave you everything. I worked 18 hours a day for us, and you go running to some accountant. Is that what this is? You were bored. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had stolen my inheritance, gaslighted me about my own memory, and was currently hiding over $3 million in stolen assets. The urge to scream was physical. It burned in my throat like acid. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to throw the USB drive in his face and watch him crumble, but I didn't. I remembered Noah's advice. Let him feel safe. I took a sip of water. My hand was steady. I have nothing to say to those photos, I said quietly. Diane smirked. She thought I was folding. Of course you don't, Diane said, because they speak for themselves, Your Honor. She addressed the mediator. We believe this establishes a clear pattern of marital misconduct. We are asking for a summary judgment on the assets. Marianne leaned forward. She didn't look at the photos. She looked at Caleb. We are not disputing the meetings. Marianne said, Violet did meet with Mr. Price. Caleb's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected us to admit it. He thought we would lie. which would give him more leverage. However, Marianne continued, we dispute the nature of the relationship, and since Mr. Richardson seems so confident that Mr. Price is on his side, I assume you have no objection to Mr. Price testifying tomorrow? Caleb laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Objection, Caleb said, leaning back and crossing his arms. I insist on it. Noah works for me now. He knows exactly what kind of financial mess Violet is in. He looked at me, a cruel smile playing on his lips. I will let him speak, Caleb said. In fact, I can't wait to hear what he has to say. I met his gaze and held it. I will let the court hear from the person you trust most. I said. Caleb frowned. Just for a second. He didn't like the tone of my voice. It wasn't the voice of a defeated woman, but his arrogance was too thick to let the doubt settle. He dismissed it. To speed things up, Marianne said, opening her own file. We are willing to stipulate to the authenticity of the bank records provided by Mr. Price in his preliminary audit. However, we have one request. We need Mr. Richardson to sign an affidavit confirming that the ledger for Cedar Row Holdings, as provided by his new forensic accountant, is complete and accurate to the best of his knowledge. This was the trap. If Caleb signed the affidavit, he was swearing under oath that the cleaned version of the ledger, the one he thought Noah had scrubbed, was the real one. If we later produced the original ledger from the USB drive, he wouldn't just be guilty of theft. He would be guilty of perjury. Caleb didn't even read the paper. He was so eager to close the trap on me that he didn't see the bear trap beneath his own feet. He thought Noah had deleted the incriminating entries. He thought he was signing a blank piece of paper. Give me the pen, Caleb said. He signed it with a flourish. There, he said, sliding it back. The ledger is accurate. Noah did a thorough job. Now, can we finish this? Marianne took the paper and placed it carefully in her briefcase. Thank you, Mr. Richardson, she said. We will see you in court tomorrow. The mediator called a recess. I walked out into the hallway, needing to breathe. The air in the room was suffocating. I stood by the water fountain, staring at the beige wall, trying to slow my heart rate. Footsteps approached. I turned. Caleb was standing there. Diane was busy on her phone down the hall. We were alone. He moved into my personal space, looming over me. The sad, heartbroken husband mask was gone. In its place was the cold, sneering face of the man who had controlled my life for 8 years. You are making a mistake, Violet, he hissed. I am not the one who just signed a perjury trap. I thought, but I said nothing. You think you can win, he asked. You have $40 in your bank account. You have a mother in the hospital. You have no friends because I told them all what you did. He leaned closer, his breath hot on my face. You have no one. Violet, he whispered. Look around. You are all alone. Even your precious boyfriend sold you out for a check. Sign the settlement. Take the car. Drive away. Because if you walk into that courtroom tomorrow, I will destroy you so thoroughly that you will never get a job in this state again. I looked at him. I really looked at him. For years. His voice had been the voice of God in my head. When he said I was stupid, I believed him. When he said I was weak, I believed him. But now, looking at him, I didn't see a giant. I saw a small, scared man who was trying to shout down the inevitable. He was right. I didn't have a husband anymore. I didn't have my savings. I didn't have my reputation. But I had the USB drive in my purse. I straightened my spine. I looked him in the eye. You are right. Caleb, I said, my voice steady and cold. I don't have anyone. His smile widened. He thought he had broken me. But then I finished the sentence. I don't have anyone. I repeated, I have the truth. I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I heard him laugh behind me. A sound of pure arrogance. Go ahead. Run, he called out. See you in court. Honey, I walked straight to Marianne's car. She was waiting for me. Did he say anything, she asked. He tried to scare me. I said, did it work? I shook my head. No, it just made me ready. We drove back to her office. The sun was setting. casting long shadows across the city. The mood in the car was tense. We knew that the next 24 hours would decide the rest of my life. When we got to the office, Marianne checked her secure email. He sent it. She said, "Who Noah?" She said, "He sent the final confirmation email to Caleb." "Look." She turned the screen toward me. "From Noah Price to Caleb Richardson. Subject final protocol. Mr. Richardson, per your instructions, the server has been wiped. The physical drives containing the original metadata for the Ashford Creek acquisition have been drilled and disposed of. The version of the ledger currently on the system reflects the office expenses classification as discussed. There is no digital footprint left. I will be ready to testify tomorrow." It was a masterpiece of deception. Noah was telling Caleb exactly what he wanted to hear. He was confirming the crime in writing. While pretending to cover it up, Caleb replied 2 minutes later, "Excellent work. Noah, bring the invoice to court. I will have a bonus for you." "He took the bait," Marianne said softly. "He believes he is safe. He believes the evidence is gone." But then, at 11 o'clock that night, something changed. I was at my apartment, ironing my suit for court. My phone buzzed. It was an automated alert from the joint account the one Caleb had frozen, but which I still got notifications for. Alert wire transfer initiated. Amount $1,200,000. Recipient Cayman Islands Holdings via correspondent bank. I stared at the screen. My blood ran cold. He was moving the money. He must have gotten nervous, even with Noah's email, even with my performance in the hallway. Some instinct in his reptilian brain was screaming at him to run. He was emptying the Cedar Row account. He was sending the money offshore where a U.S. court judgment couldn't reach it. I called Marianne. She answered on the first ring. "He is running." I said, "He is moving the money. $1.2 million. It just hit the wire. I see it." Marianne said, "Noah just pinged me. He is watching the traffic from the server. If it leaves the country, we never get it back." I said, panic rising in my throat, "We have to stop him. We can't stop a wire at midnight." Marianne said, "But this is good." "Violet, good," I practically screamed. "How is this good?" "He is stealing the settlement because," Marianne said, her voice deadly calm, "he is moving frozen assets in violation of a temporary restraining order, and he is doing it the night before a trial." So, Marianne said, "It proves flight. It proves guilt. And most importantly, Noah has the trace. We can see exactly where it is going. He isn't hiding the money. Violet, he is putting a neon sign on it." She paused. "Go to sleep. Violet, tomorrow, he is going to walk into that courtroom thinking he is a genius. He doesn't know he just handed us the final nail." I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair, watching the clock tick. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. I thought about the $1.2 million flying through the digital ether. That was my life. That was my retirement. That was my security. And he was throwing it across the ocean just to spite me. At 7 o'clock in the morning, I showered and dressed. I put on the navy blue suit. I put on my mother's ring. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see a victim anymore. I saw a soldier. I drove to the courthouse. The morning air was crisp and cold. The sky was a brilliant, hard blue. I walked through the security checkpoint. I walked down the long marble hallway. I was the first one in the courtroom. It was empty. The judge's bench was high and imposing. The flags hung still against the wall. The silence was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I walked to the defense table and sat down. I placed my hands on the table, just like I had practiced. I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then, I heard it, the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Click, click, click. It wasn't the heavy, confident stride of Caleb. It was the sharp, precise rhythm of dress shoes moving with purpose. The footsteps stopped at the door. I didn't turn around. I knew who it was. I knew that the trap had just snapped shut. The door handle turned. The air in the room shifted. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of old wood and justice. It was time. The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Or maybe it was just the temperature of my own blood as I watched Caleb lean back in his chair. a small, triumphant smile playing on his lips. He looked like a king waiting for his coronation. Beside him, Diane Mercer stood up, smoothing her skirt with the confidence of a predator who had already cornered its prey. "Your Honor," Diane said, her voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room, "we call Mr. Noah Price to the stand." A ripple of confusion went through the gallery. The few people present, mostly clerks and a bored bailiff, looked up. It was highly irregular for the husband's legal team to call the wife's alleged lover as a witness. But Caleb wanted a spectacle. He wanted to humiliate me on the public record. Noah stood up from the back of the room. He walked down the center aisle, carrying his thick leather briefcase. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Caleb. He walked to the witness stand, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Diane approached the stand. She held up the photos of Noah and me at the diner. "Mr. Price," she began, her tone dripping with false sweetness, "you recognize the woman in these photographs?" "Yes," Noah said calmly. "It is Mrs. Violet Richardson, and you met with Mrs. Richardson multiple times over the last 6 months, including late at night in parking lots and diners far from her home." "Yes," Noah said. "And during these meetings, did she give you things? Documents, gifts?" "She gave me documents." "Yes," Noah answered. Caleb chuckled audibly. The judge shot him a warning look. But Caleb didn't care. He was enjoying this too much. Diane turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defense rests its argument on the character of the respondent. Mrs. Richardson claims financial abuse, yet she was the one sneaking around with this man. We believe Mr. Price's testimony will confirm that the only deception in this marriage came from her." She turned back to Noah, ready for the kill shot. "Mr. Price, you are currently employed by Mr. Richardson. Is that correct?" "I was retained by Larkstone Capital Partners to conduct an internal audit." Noah corrected. Diane smiled. "Exactly. And in your expert opinion, after reviewing Mr. Richardson's finances, did you find any evidence of the hidden assets Mrs. Richardson has wildly accused him of stealing?" The room went silent. This was the moment. Caleb leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Noah, waiting for the exoneration he had paid for. Noah adjusted his glasses. He looked at Diane, then he looked at Caleb. Finally, he turned his chair to face Judge Vance directly. "I did review the ledger provided to me by Mr. Richardson," Noah said, his voice steady and loud. "However, I need to correct a misunderstanding regarding my relationship with the respondent." Diane frowned. "Excuse me, I did not meet Mrs. Richardson at those diners to conduct an affair." Noah said, "I met her because she hired me." Caleb's smile faltered. "Hired you?" Diane asked sharply. "Hired you to do what?" "To investigate a series of shell companies used to launder marital assets," Noah said. Diane froze. Caleb stood up halfway, his face turning a pale shade of gray. "Objection," Diane shouted. "Hostile witness. This man is on our payroll. Overruled." Judge Vance said, leaning forward. "Sit down. Mr. Richardson. Continue. Mr. Price?" Noah reached into his briefcase. He didn't pull out the report Caleb had seen. He pulled out the USB drive. He plugged it into the court's presentation system. A spreadsheet appeared on the large monitors facing the bench. "Mr. Richardson hired me 2 weeks ago to audit his books," Noah explained. "He provided me with a sanitized ledger and instructed me to certify it. Yesterday, he signed an affidavit swearing that ledger was accurate." Noah clicked a button. The screen changed. Red lines appeared, highlighting dozens of transactions. "However," Noah continued, "this is the original ledger, recovered from the backup server before Mr. Richardson ordered me to destroy it." "You liar," Caleb screamed. He jumped to his feet, knocking his chair over. "You work for me, I paid you." Judge Vance slammed her gavel. "Order, Mr. Richardson. If you open your mouth again, I will have you removed." Noah didn't flinch. He continued as if Caleb hadn't spoken. "The screen shows a clear pattern of embezzlement," Noah said, pointing to the figures. "Commission bonuses earned by Mr. Richardson were diverted to a shell entity called Vector Logistics. Vector Logistics then paid consulting fees to another LLC called Cedar Row Holdings. He clicked again. A photo of a townhouse appeared. Cedar Row Holdings was used to purchase this property in Ashford Creek. Noah said, "The down payment of $120,000 matches exactly the amount withdrawn from the Richardsons' joint savings account 3 years ago, an amount Mr. Richardson claimed was lost in a bad bond investment." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a balloon that had just been popped. Diane Mercer looked like she had swallowed a lemon. She was flipping through her papers, trying to find a way out. But there was no way out. The math was on the screen. But Noah wasn't done. "Your Honor," Noah said, "there is one more thing." He pulled up an email. It was the email Caleb had sent him just days ago. The subject line read, "Final Protocol." In this email, Mr. Richardson explicitly instructs me to delete the metadata linking him to the Ashford Creek property. Noah said, "And here is his reply to my confirmation, where he authorizes a bonus for the destruction of evidence." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Diane Mercer stood up. Her face flushed. "Your Honor, this is a violation of attorney-client privilege, Mr. Price was working for us." Judge Vance looked at Diane with eyes like flint. "Counselor, the crime-fraud exception applies here," the judge said, her voice icy. "You cannot hire an expert to help you commit perjury and then claim privilege. This is evidence of a felony." Caleb looked at me. His eyes were wide, wild, and terrified. He looked like an animal caught in a trap he had set for someone else. "You set me up," he hissed across the aisle. I didn't say a word. I just touched the empty spot on my finger where my mother's ring used to be. Then, Noah delivered the final blow, and regarding the temporary restraining order on the assets, Noah said, "At 11:14 last night, a wire transfer of $1,200,000 was initiated from the Cedar Row account to a bank in the Cayman Islands." Judge Vance's head snapped up. "Mr. Richardson moved frozen assets?" she asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Noah said. "I tracked the wire. It is currently pending in a correspondent bank in New York. It can be clawed back if the court issues an order within the hour." Judge Vance didn't hesitate. She turned to her clerk. "Issue the order immediately," she commanded. "Freeze that transfer. And freeze every account associated with Caleb Richardson, Larkstone Capital, and Cedar Row Holdings." She turned her gaze on Caleb. It was a look of pure disgust. "Mr. Richardson," she said, "in 20 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a brazen attempt to defraud this court. You not only stole from your wife, but you also tried to suborn perjury from an expert witness. It is a lie." Caleb shouted, losing all control. "She planned this. She and her boyfriend planned this whole thing to rob me." I stood up then. My legs were shaking, but my voice was steady. I looked him in the eye. "He is not my boyfriend." "Caleb," I said. Caleb stopped shouting. He stared at me, his chest heaving. "He is the truth." I said, "And you were so arrogant, so sure that money could buy everyone, that you paid him to expose you. You signed the trap yourself." Caleb slumped back into his chair. He looked at Diane, but she had moved a step away from him, distancing herself from the radioactive fallout. Judge Vance spent the next 20 minutes reading the judgment into the record. It was a massacre. She awarded me 100% of the marital assets. Citing Caleb's fraudulent dissipation, she awarded me the house. She awarded me the Ashford Creek condo. She ordered Caleb to repay legal fees for both sides. And then, she looked at the bailiff. "I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for an investigation into wire fraud and perjury." She said, "Mr. Richardson, you are not to leave the state." As the gavel came down with a final decisive crack, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying. It wasn't just the stress of the trial. It was the weight of 8 years of gaslighting, the weight of being told I was crazy, forgetful, and incompetent. Caleb sat in his chair, staring at the table. He looked small. He looked ordinary. The power he had held over me for so long had evaporated, leaving only a bitter, greedy man in an expensive suit. Diane packed her bag and walked out without waiting for him. Noah stepped down from the witness stand. He walked over to my table. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a hug. He just nodded. "We got it back." He said simply, "Thank you." I whispered. He handed me a small envelope. "Caleb gave this to his lawyer to put in the safe." Noah said. I grabbed it before the bailiff secured his briefcase. I opened the envelope. Inside was a gold band with a tiny, chipped sapphire. My mother's ring. I slid it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. I walked out of the courtroom into the bright hallway. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like oxygen. It tasted like freedom. I pulled out my phone. I had one last thing to do. I opened my email app. I drafted a message to the HR department at Blue Hollow Systems, copying the entire executive team and the friends Caleb had lied to. Subject: the truth. Regarding my divorce. Attached is the court transcript and the forensic accounting report proving that the allegations of infidelity made against me were a fabrication designed to cover up a multi-year scheme of financial fraud and embezzlement by Caleb Richardson. The court has ruled in my favor on all counts. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. And I am clearing my name. I hit send. I watched the progress bar slide across the screen. Sent. I walked out the front doors of the courthouse. The sun was blinding. The city noise washed over me, horns, sirens, people talking. It didn't feel chaotic anymore. It felt alive. Caleb had tried to take my side piece. He thought he was taking a lover. He thought he was taking my heart. But he didn't understand the game. He didn't understand that when you push a woman into the dark, she doesn't just disappear. She learns to see in the dark. She learns to find the weapons you hid there. He took Noah Price, thinking he was buying an accomplice. Instead, he bought a mirror. And when he finally looked into it, he didn't see the king he thought he was. He saw the thief he had always been. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold air. The best revenge is not making them scream. It is not burning their house down. The best revenge is simply turning on the lights and watching them scramble because they have nowhere left to hide in the lies they built. I walked down the steps, my mother's ring flashing in the sunlight, ready to start the first day of my life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Olivia Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.